Hey, what's up, psychos? Welcome to another episode of Take Your Pills, Psychopath, the comedy podcast that exploits mental illness for personal profit. What? Trademark. I'm your host, John F. O'Donnell, JFOD. How we all doing out there? How are we doing with our mental health this week? Are we hanging in? Are we doing all right? Are we sticking to our mental health routines? Are we slipping? What's going on? How are we? Full disclosure, I've been kind of on the depressed side for the past few days. I have no idea why. My energy level's been low, feeling kind of bad about myself. So yeah, I've been kind of sad. I've been sleeping a bit too much. Haven't been drinking enough water. I'm kind of dehydrated a little bit, and I've just been a little sad, a little bit depressed, and I'm not exactly sure why. Hopefully I'm coming out of it. Podcasting helps. Getting to express myself helps. Doing stand-up helps. I did, it's interesting. I've been kind of like a little bit sad, but then when I have a stand-up show, it all kind of flips, and it goes well. I don't know if it's an addiction, if it's the serotonin release. I don't know, man, but it feels good to do that. So I'm going to keep doing it. What are some things that you all do, you psychos, to stay well? What are some parts of your mental health routines? Let's get a dialogue going. Send me an email at takeyourpillspod@gmail.com. and we can discuss it. I could even read it on the podcast if that's something that you want. If not, no sweat. Don't sweat it. Yeah. I don't know what else is going on with me. Just doing my thing. Not a ton. Keeping busy, working on different projects. The stand-up, I know I was just talking about the stand-up, but I'll say the stand-up, I feel good about it. I feel good about what I'm putting together. I don't know where it's going to take me, but got to keep doing it. Got to. Yeah. Oh, if you guys have not joined my newsletter yet, please do that at jfodnews.com. I also have a Patreon with some really cool benefits. The first tier, you get a bonus episode every week, which is cool. A behind the paywall bonus episode. So if you need more Take Your Pill Psychopath in your life, man, that's the way to go. Next tier, you get that, and you also get an AMA, and Ask Me Anything session. That's monthly. And if you do the next tier, you get the you get the bonus episode, you get the AMA, and you also get to have a video chat, a half-hour video chat with me, one-on-one, if that's something that you're interested in doing. So yeah, that's patreon.com/JFOD, patreon.com/JFOD, and it's a really great way to help out the show and help me out. So contribute if you can, if you find value in this show. I appreciate it. This week is actually going to be a solo show. It's just going to be me, man. I've looked through the interwebs, found some interesting psychology and psychiatry pieces, some articles that we're going to go through. I'm going to give a little bit of commentary. We're going to discuss. Hopefully, we're going to have a good time doing so. We're going to learn some stuff because it's good to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on because things are always changing in the land of psychology and psychiatry. It's almost like they don't know that much about the brain, man. They're learning more, but there's still so much to go. So much further to go. So, yeah. I think this first piece is a good way to start, especially because how I've been feeling this past week. Yeah. Well, I guess, first let's just go over an overview, but this first piece is called Why You're Never Going to Be Satisfied with Life. And talks about the psychology of that. Then the next piece we're going to read is 4 Functions of Expressive Arts Therapy. I'm super fascinated with art therapy and how that works. So we're going to learn more about that, which I think is worthwhile for sure. And I find the art therapy of having a creative outlet to be huge in my life, throughout dealing with my bipolar disorder. Then we've got 7 habits that can lower your risk of dementia. Yes, please. Definitely want to learn about that. Dementia is a very challenging, very upsetting condition. One of my grandmothers suffered from that before she passed away. And it was rough. It was not easy. Let's see what else we got. What antisocial personality disorder looks like in late life. Fascinating. That'll definitely be interesting to read and learn about that. And let's see what else we got. We're also going to go over something entitled New Research Suggests Adverse Childhood Experiences Accelerate the Biological Processes of Aging. That is interesting. And then if we have time, I might throw something else in there. So we'll see what we got. Cool. Yeah. I said to email me letting me know about anything going on with your guys' mental health routines. Also email just to let me know how the show is going. takeyourpillspod@gmail.com. I would love to connect with some fellow psychos. Also, if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, it would be really cool if you left a rating and, a 5-star rating and a comment would be really helpful. That helps the algorithm show the podcast to more people. So that would be cool. Again, I appreciate all of you, and let's start reading some shit. All right, this first piece is in Psychology Today. It's called Why You're Never Going to Be Satisfied with Life, the surprising psychology of why dissatisfaction is hardwired. And it's by someone named Nir Eyal. Key points. Researchers have found that feeling contented isn't good for the species because it keeps us from seeking further benefits or improvements. Oh, God, isn't that annoying, you guys? Isn't that annoying that we can't feel contented, evolutionarily speaking? Ugh. Psychological factors that make satisfaction temporary include boredom, negativity bias, rumination, and hedonic adaptation. All right, hopefully they'll expand upon that because I don't understand all of that. Discontent is not a reason to give up on success. Rather, it's a reason to introduce the opportunity for frequent and meaningful victories. Okay, those are the key points. Now let's get into the article. Why are we perpetually restless and unsatisfied? We live in the safest, healthiest, most well-educated, most democratic time in history, and yet some part of the human psyche causes us to look for an escape from things stirring inside us constantly. Yeah, why is that? Why is that? As the 18th century poet Samuel Johnson said, quote, "My life is one long escape from myself," end quote. Me too, brother. Me too, the author says. The truth is, we're not wired to feel content or satisfied. Ever. Ugh. There's a simple reason for that. As expressed by researchers for the Review of General Psychology, quote, "If satisfaction and pleasure were permanent, there might be little incentive to continue seeking further benefits or advances," end quote. In other words, feeling contented wasn't good for the species. Our ancestors worked harder and strove further because they evolved to be perpetually perturbed, and so we remain today. Oh, man. Oh, man, this is interesting and troubling. Don't you think, psychos? Now, the next section, the 4 components of dissatisfaction. 4 psychological factors make satisfaction temporary. The first is boredom. The lengths people will go to avoid boredom are shocking, literally. A 2014 study published in Science observed participants who were asked to sit in a room and think for 15 minutes. The room was empty except for a device that allowed participants to mildly but painfully electrocute themselves. Why would anyone want to do that, you might ask? When asked beforehand, every participant in the study said they would pay money to avoid being shocked. However, when left alone in the room with the machine and nothing else to do, 67% of men and 25% of women shocked themselves. Many did so multiple times. What? The study demonstrated that people dislike being alone with their thoughts so much that they'll prefer to do anything else, even if that activity is negative. I mean, sometimes I don't like being alone with my thoughts, but then I'll just think of some kind of creative endeavor, and that'll kind of allow me to sustain myself. But wow, man, this is hilarious and messed up. It's no surprise, therefore, that most of the top 25 websites in America sell escape from our daily drudgery, whether through shopping, celebrity gossip, or bite-sized doses of social interaction. The second psychological factor driving us is negativity bias. It's been defined as, quote, a phenomena in which negative events are most salient and demand attention more powerfully than neutral or positive events, end quote. As the author of one study concluded, quote, it appears to be a basic, pervasive fact of psychology that bad is stronger than good. Such pessimism begins very early in life. Babies begin to show signs of negativity bias starting at just 7 months of age, suggesting this tendency is inborn. Researchers also believe that we tend to have an easier time recalling bad memories than good ones. Oh, great. So this is so messed up, man. Why are we wired this way? Why do these negative things have to be what gives us our evolutionary advantage? Studies have found people are more likely to recall unhappy moments in their childhood, even if they would describe their upbringing as generally happy. Negativity bias almost certainly gave us an evolutionary edge. Good things are nice, but bad things can kill you. That's why we pay attention to the bad stuff first and remember it better. Useful for the species. But what a bummer. Yeah, I agree with that. The third factor is rumination. Our tendency to keep thinking about bad experiences. Yes. What is this rumination bullshit? If you've ever chewed on something that you did or that someone did to you over and over again, then you've experienced rumination. This, quote, passive comparison of one's current situation with some unachieved standard can manifest in self-critical thoughts such as, why can't I handle things better? As one study notes, quote, by reflecting on what went wrong and how to rectify it, people may be able to discover sources of error or alternative strategies, ultimately leading to not repeating mistakes and possibly doing better in the future, end quote. That's another potentially useful process, but boy, can it make us miserable. Yeah. A fourth factor may be the cruelest of all. It's hedonic adaptation. The tendency to quickly return to a baseline level of satisfaction no matter what happens to us in life. Hedonic adaptation is Mother Nature's bait and switch. All sorts of life events we think would make us happier actually don't, or at least not for long. Okay, this is messed up. As David Myers writes in The Pursuit of Happiness, every desirable experience, passionate love, a spiritual high, the pleasure of a new possession, the exhilaration of success, is transitory. Of course, as with boredom, negativity bias, and rumination, there are evolutionary benefits to hedonic adaptation. As the author of one study explains, as new goals continually capture one's attention, one constantly strives to be happy without realizing that in the long run, such efforts are futile. Life's just about moments, man. Taken together, these four components add up to a lot of dissatisfaction in life, even if your circumstances are truly great. Humans may be wired to pursue happiness, but we're not too well equipped to experience it. How messed up is that? Humans may be wired to pursue happiness, so that's what we're pursuing, but we're not too well equipped to experience it. Wow. What a crazy contradiction, oxymoron, whatever you want to call it. Can we cue the sad trombone music now? Is futility our fate? No. All right, cool. Here we go. Dissatisfaction is not defeat. If you find yourself feeling unhappy with life, that doesn't mean you've been defeated. The takeaway here is that if you're unhappy, you're normal. Dissatisfaction is responsible for our species' advancements, and if you never felt it, you'd be at a serious disadvantage. Discontent is not a reason to give up on success. Rather, it's a reason to introduce the opportunity for frequent and meaningful victories into your life. It's important to understand that struggle and hard times are just part of being human. High achievers push themselves through the discomfort and discontent rather than trying to escape it with distraction. Every day is a chance to live according to your values, which I define as attributes of the person you want to be. Living out your values means spending your time purposefully on the things that you decide are important. You can do this very concretely if you build your values into your calendar. This means scheduling time for what matters most. At the end of the day, you can look at what you intended to do, compare it to what you ended up doing, and celebrate your victory when you stayed on track. When you live up to your values, instead of distracting yourself from feeling discomfort and discontent, you become indistractable. Wow. All right. That's cool. So there is hope. You can live up to your values. You can figure out what your values are, figure out what your goals are, and push through discontent and satisfaction and distraction rather in order to achieve them. Doesn't sound like we're wired to make that super easy to do, but we can do it. We're pursuing happiness while we're not particularly wired well to deal with how that makes us feel. What an interesting piece. Wow. Pretty wild, man. Why you're never going to be satisfied with life. Ugh. Crazy. All right. Let's keep going. Next piece. 4 functions of expressive arts therapy. We need to regulate before we can explore and restore. This is also in Psychology Today, and this is by Kathy Malchiati, PhD. Key points. Expressive arts therapy, by definition, is an integrative psychotherapeutic process including movement, sound, imagery, and storytelling. Self-regulation and co-regulation are essential foundations for effective expressive arts therapy. Exploration includes supporting the ability to be improvisational, flexible, and in many cases, imaginative. All right, those are the key points. Let's jump into the article. Expressive approaches capitalize on a variety of reparative factors, including implicit communication, active participation, and sensory-based experiences. Expressive arts therapy, by definition, is an integrative psychotherapeutic process including movement, sound, enactment, imagery, storytelling, imagination, and play. One way to unpack how this approach works is through its 4 main and most general functions. These are self-regulation, co-regulation, exploration, and restoration. These form a continuum of general goals in therapy, beginning with regulation of mind and body through practicing and experiencing sensory-based experiences and attunement with the practitioner to establish safety, trust, and confidence. They are the foundations necessary to expand capacity for exploration during therapy and to eventually experience restoration of the self. All right, that's an overview there of expressive arts therapy. So first, She's going to talk about self-regulation. Stabilization and establishing a sense of safety are psychotherapeutic goals for most individuals. Self-regulation is a term used not only to describe the capacity to manage one's responses to stress, but also to be able to soothe and calm body and mind. It is the ability to moderate emotions, somatic responses, and cognition. Many of the art forms used within the continuum of expressive arts therapy have good evidence on how they can support emotional self-soothing as well as measurable physiological changes, that result in stress reduction. The kinesthetic sensory qualities of movement, enactment, visual imagery, touch, and sound naturally involve active engagement of the body in contrast to talk-only approaches. In particular, these qualities potentially mediate lower brain functions such as heart rate and respiration through specific approaches. The most basic function of rhythm that is found in all the arts is also key to physiological regulation. All right, interesting. It is a source of stabilization that supports the internalized sense of safety. For many individuals, focused music listening and soothing sounds of playing instruments with calming tones are part of decreasing hyperactivation. The cadence of the voice while singing or in prosody has a similar impact. Similarly, when withdrawal or disassociation are prominent reactions, rhythm-based experiences can help the individual safely explore what enlivens or energizes, grounding and anchoring the person in the here and now. Okay, this article's kind of dense, man. But we're going to get through it. We've already started. We are committed. Let's do this thing. Because it's pretty interesting. So that was self-regulation. Wow, this is like a proper deep dive explanation of how expressive arts therapy works. With all my intuition is like, yeah, it's art. You can express yourself through art. But I guess that this is the psychology behind it. So what do you guys think? Here we go. Co-regulation. So that was just all we just learned about self-regulation. Now, co-regulation is often defined as responsive interactions that provide support, reflection, and attunement. In order to achieve it, it requires therapists to pay close attention to the individual's cues with consistency and sensitivity. In psychotherapy, it is dependent on the changing social interactions between therapist and individual over time. Like an internalized sense of safety, it is well documented that a healthy connection early in life between caregiver and infant is essential in shaping an individual's ability to self-regulate throughout life. Okay, that is important. While the term co-regulation began as a way to describe caregiver support for infants, it is now used to describe regulatory support that occurs within the context of caring relationships across the lifespan. In expressive arts therapy, arts-based co-regulatory interactions are key. In general, co-regulation is less dependent on words and is sensory specific to the characteristics of each expressive art form. For example, art and play-based experiences emphasize interaction mostly through tactile, visual, and kinesthetic senses. Music includes sound, prosody, vocalizations, social engagement, and rhythm-based experiences that can be co-regulatory. Psychodrama, improvisation, and enactment offer multisensory ways to establish co-regulation through role play, modeling, mirroring, and enactment. Holy shit, is this not the craziest, most pretentious way to explain art therapy? But we're locked in. We're doing it. Shared regulation, a form of mutual regulation, is something found in group expressive arts experiences. The synchrony of moving within a group, singing together, or participating in an improvisation troupe or dramatic enactment with others are all social experiences that stimulate shared regulatory moments. Many expressive experiences are designed to help participants pick up on each other's rhythms and begin to synchronize their movements even when drawing to music. Mirroring and entrainment are two essential techniques used to support co-regulation. Mirroring is a commonly used approach to establish and enhance the relationship between the individual and the helping professional. Within expressive arts therapy, it is generally described as the embodiment or reflection of an individual's movement or nonverbal communications. The goal of mirroring is not only imitation of postures, facial expressions, and gestures, but also includes attunement between the individual and practitioner. The overall goal of mirroring in the form of movement is to help individuals experience their bodies in a safe way as the basis for any additional self-regulating experiences. Okay? That's mirroring. Entrainment, okay, also called rhythmic synchronization, is a second expressive arts approach that can support co-regulation and shared regulation. Entrainment occurs when the rhythm of one's experience synchronizes with the rhythm of another. For example, babies hear their first rhythm in utero listening to their mother's heartbeats. The natural way to claim infants is to sway, rock, or pat them to the rhythm of a resting heart rate. In expressive arts therapy, heartbeat, motor activity, and brain activity can fall into synchronous rhythms through the therapist's voice and through sensory experiences that match a resting heart rate, 60 to 80 beats a minute, slow it down or speed it up, and energize individuals. Okay, next section. I'm finding this article tough to get through. I'm just always going to be honest with you psychos that I'm finding this like annoying in the respect that it's like, yeah, I guess it's good to explain expressive arts therapy in this way. I don't know why it's annoying me. Maybe because it's so dense and I can't make it funny in any capacity. But and it's art therapy. I was like, oh, a piece about art therapy. This will be cool. This will be interesting. I believe in art therapy. But now I guess we are learning the psychology behind art therapy and the different techniques and why it works. I guess that is interesting. It is interesting. Here we go. Exploration. The word exploration generally refers to the action of traveling in or through an unfamiliar area in order to learn about it. It can also mean deeply examining a particular subject or theme. These two experiences form the core of any form of psychotherapy, but exploration goes beyond talk in expressive arts therapy. It engages individuals in traveling in unfamiliar areas through implicit communication and self-examination through multi-level and integrative experiences. Active exploration through the senses is a distinguishing feature of most expressive arts therapy sessions. Because expressive arts therapy is an action-oriented form of psychotherapy, the regulatory experiences described in the two previous sections support the foundation necessary for individuals to engage in expressive forms of communication with safety and within their windows of capacity. This includes supporting the ability to be improvisational, flexible, and in many cases imaginative. It also involves relational moments that enhance and support trust, the basis of all forms of healing. Exploration is part of normal child development. It is also an experience that may be disrupted during early childhood by trauma, loss, physical illness, attachment problems, or lack of access to conditions that support play or social engagement. These disruptions and other factors may replace the healthy curiosity necessary for playful exploration with protective reactions that result from a lack of safety. As a result, the ability to explore may be unavailable. When an individual has had early childhood adversity, exploration may even be focused on scanning for danger in the environment. In these cases, expressive arts therapy can reintroduce experiences to support curiosity through engagement with hands-on, action-oriented, and attuned moments. All right, that's exploration. Cool. And the last section, wow, this piece, guys, huh? Restoration. In expressive arts therapy, the goal is to ultimately facilitate restoration of the self through arts-based, sensory-focused approaches. That is, to support the individual, family, or group in recovering wholeness, well-being, resilience, and self-efficacy. Possibly the most compelling reason for the use of the expressive arts in psychotherapy is the sensory nature of the arts themselves, a restorative factor not found in strictly talk-only therapies. In recent years, neurobiology has taught us that we need to come to our senses in developing effective components for psychotherapy for both mind and body. For example, many practitioners now agree that traumatic stress reactions are not just a series of distressing thoughts and feelings. These reactions are experienced on a sensory level by mind and body, and in order for restoration to occur, addressing the senses is key. I believe expressive arts therapy has a unique role in restoring a sense of vitality and joy because aliveness is not something we can be talked into. We do not know the exact mechanisms for why this occurs or even how to accurately measure these restorative moments. Perhaps for now, we can just describe restoration as something beyond making meaning and as a reconnection to enlivenment, vigor, and passion. Ultimately, it is when expression, whether through image, movement, sound, enactment, story, or play, becomes an affirmation of life. All right, we did it. We made it through that piece. We just learned a whole lot about expressive arts therapy. Wow. All right, that was a tough one to read, to be honest. It was hard to read it and follow it at the same time. I hope you guys listening at home found it interesting and not too dry. Oh my goodness gracious. What a piece. 4 functions of expressive arts therapy. We need to regulate before we can explore and restore. I mean, from reading it right there, I was like, oh, this is going to be an interesting piece. And it was interesting. It absolutely was interesting. It was just hard to process in real time. But I kind of got a sense of what's going on. I feel like I like how this legitimizes art therapy. I like that because I remember back in the day, art therapy was just seen as kind of woo-woo or kind of like very marginalized, you know? So I like the idea of it being pushed more into the mainstream as a way of helping people get through issues. And I guess that there is some science behind it. And it was explained here in this piece, and I don't know why I have such hostility towards it. I really should let that go. Maybe it's a product of how my past week has been going. I don't know, guys. What do you think? What do you think? All right, let's move on. We're doing good here. Okay, this next piece is entitled 7 Habits That Can Lower Your Risk of Dementia. And this is from SciTech Daily. Yeah, let's see. This is going to be good. Worth knowing, certainly. Okay. Scientists have identified 7 healthy links to lower rates of dementia in those with genetic risk. According to a recent study published in Neurology, the medical journal of the American Academy of Neurology, 7 healthy habits and lifestyle factors can help reduce the risk of dementia in people with the greatest genetic risk. Okay. The 7 cardiovascular and brain health factors are known as the American Heart Association's Life's Simple 7. Being active, eating healthier, losing weight, not smoking, keeping a healthy blood pressure, regulating cholesterol, and lowering blood sugar. All right, so healthy lifestyle. All right, let's see. Being active, eating healthier, losing weight, not smoking, keeping a healthy blood pressure, regulating cholesterol, and lowering blood sugar. All right. All things that sound like you should do but aren't necessarily the most fun thing to do. But the payoff can be worth it to avoid dementia. Quote, these healthy habits in the Life's Simple 7 have been linked to a lower risk of dementia overall, but is uncertain whether the same applies to people with a high genetic risk. Okay? Said study author Adrian Tin, PhD, of the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson. Quote, "The good news is that even for people who are at the highest genetic risk, living by this same healthier lifestyle are likely to have a lower risk of dementia." All right. In the research, 2,738 people with African heritage and 8,823 individuals with European ancestry were tracked over the course of 30 years. At the start of the trial, participants' average age was 54. The level of each of the 7 health factors were reported by study participants. The range of total scores was 0 to 14, with 0 being the most unhealthy score and 14 denoting the most healthy score. People of European heritage scored on average 8.3, whereas people of African descent scored on average 6.6. Researchers calculated genetic risk scores at the start of the study using genome-wide statistics of Alzheimer's disease, which have been used to study the genetic risk for dementia. Participants with European ancestry were divided into 5 groups, and those with African ancestry were divided into 3 groups based on genetic risk scores. The group with the highest genetic risk involved people who had at least one copy of the APOE gene variant associated with Alzheimer's disease, APOE4. Of those with European ancestry, 27.9% had the APOE4 variant, while of those who had African ancestry, 40.4% had the OPOE4 variant. The group with the lowest risk had the APOE2 variant, which has been associated with a decreased risk of dementia. By the end of the study, 1,603 people with European ancestry developed dementia, and 631 people with African ancestry developed dementia. For people with European ancestry, researchers found that people with the highest scores in the lifestyle factors had a lower risk of dementia across all 5 genetic risk groups, including the group with the highest genetic risk of dementia. For each 1-point increase in the lifestyle factor score, there was a 9% lower risk of developing dementia among those with European ancestry compared with the low category of the lifestyle factor score. The intermediate and high categories were associated with 30% and 43% lower risks for dementia, respectively. Among those with African ancestry, the intermediate and high categories were associated with 6% and 17% lower risk for dementia, respectively. Among people with African ancestry, researchers found a similar pattern of declining dementia risk across all 3 groups among those with higher scores on the lifestyle factors. But researchers said the smaller number of participants in this group limited the findings, so more research is needed. Quote, "Large sample sizes from diverse populations are needed to get more reliable estimates of the effects of these modifiable health factors on dementia risk within different genetic risk groups and ancestral backgrounds," Tin said. A limitation of the study was the smaller sample size among people of African ancestry, and that many African American participants were recruited from one location. The study was supported by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, the National Institute of Health, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the National Human Genome Research Institute. Okay, interesting. 30-year study. Be healthy, is what they're saying. Be healthy, and your brain will stay healthy. There you go. Interesting. So the 7 habits include exercising, losing weight, having good nutrition, maintaining a healthy blood pressure, reducing blood sugar, not smoking, and regulating cholesterol. There you go. There you go. So let's all just avoid dementia. That shit scares me, man. That shit scares me. Oh God, this life, baby. All right. Let's keep moving. This next one is called What Antisocial Personality Disorder Looks Like in Late Life. Older people may be more likely to have antisocial personality than you realize. Interesting. This is in Psychology Today. This is by Susan Krauss Whitborn, PhD. Some key points. Researchers examine how people with psychopathy don't necessarily act out by committing antisocial behaviors. Older adults with undiagnosed ASPD, antisocial personality disorder, lacked the criminal energy to engage in physically demanding actions that could lead to their arrest. Researchers found that it is possible for older adults with ASPD to continue to cause disturbance and create conflict in their lives. That older adults are incapable of antisocial behavior may seem like a truism. After all, don't people mellow out as they get older? Aren't older individuals more likely to agree with conventional society's bounds on propriety just because they've had more time to gain exposure to these standards of behavior? Indeed, if you stop and think about the ages of criminal characters portrayed in the media, it may be difficult to come up with any examples in which the culprit was over the age of even 40 years old. You might even have to go back to 1979's classic film Going in Style, starring George Burns, Art Carney, and Lee Strasberg, television series with psychopathic characters such as any on the Law and Orders rarely feature aging characters other than those who serve as prosecutors or detectives. Does all this mean that criminality or its diagnostic counterpart, antisocial personality disorder, indeed just fades away in the later years of life? According to Washington University School of Medicine's Catherine Holzer and colleagues, it is plausible that the so-called theory of criminal energetics applies and that those with antisocial personality disorder simply run out of steam. Interesting. Too old to commit the crime. However, there's another explanation you might consider. Perhaps these individuals are there all along, but they don't measure up to the current diagnostic criteria, the majority of which lean heavily toward behaviors evident in youth. Interesting. As the Washington University researchers note, quote, the development of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, criteria for ASPD, antisocial personality disorder, was heavily influenced by research with younger rather than older adults. These studies are still considered among the most prominent in the field. Has this misguided approach inadvertently led to a failure to detect the ASPD that might actually still exist in older populations? Fascinating. Some diagnostic considerations. Before getting to this question about a possible age bias in the criteria for ASPD, it's important to remind yourself of the fact that ASPD and psychopathy are distinct entities, and both are distinct from criminal behavior. People with psychopathy don't necessarily act out by committing antisocial behaviors and as a result would be less likely to be incarcerated than individuals diagnosed with ASPD. Nor do all criminals meet the criteria for this disorder. Interesting. A second diagnostic consideration relates to the co-occurrence of mood and substance use disorders in older individuals with ASPD. As a result, clinicians treating their aging patients with these co-occurring disorders may focus less on the antisocial behaviors that accompany or could even be masked by these conditions. Quote, a veritable crime wave onto himself, end quote. As background to their investigation, the authors drew from a case of a Mr. Z, a 77-year-old white man with a lifetime history of antisocial behaviors that included multiple homicides, both in and out of prison. This veritable crime wave met the criteria of ASPD as well as a paranoid personality disorder, along with several forms of substance use disorder. He didn't desist from his violence or substance use until his 80s, and even then, his rehabilitation was considered precarious. As this case illustrates, it's possible for older adults to continue, as the authors note, a highly energetic career as a criminal. The question is, could they receive a new diagnosis in later life on the ASPD criteria? What might ASPD symptoms look like in older adults? To answer the question of whether the ASPD diagnostic criteria have an inherent age bias, the Washington University authors began by taking advantage of the National Epidemiological Survey on Alcohol and Related Conditions 3, or NESARC-3. The authors used the nationally recognized measure of specific antisocial behaviors to compare responses from a sample of 11,755 young adults, 18 to 34, matched with 14,738 adults aged 50 and over. The extensive nature of the AUDADIS-5 made it possible for the research team to determine whether an individual exhibited ASPD pathology by showing elevated scores across the entire measure. As examples, the AUADS-5 asked participants to that's by the way, that's the measure of specific antisocial behaviors, is the AUADS-5. Asked participants to rate themselves on the frequency of behavior such as ever hurt an animal on purpose or often scare people to do things. If an individual met the standard of showing ASPD pathology according to the entire instrument, the next question became whether this pathology would be picked up on items specific to the ASPD diagnostic criteria. As it turned out, it was not. Older adults with higher ASPD pathology were less likely to endorse key diagnostic indicators, specifically 1. Failure to conform to norms regarding legal behavior as indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. 2. Irritability and aggressiveness as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. 3. Consistent irresponsibility as indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior to honor financial obligations. Based on these findings, older adults with undiagnosed ASPD would indeed seem to lack the criminal energy to engage in physically demanding actions that could lead to their arrest. Nevertheless, the authors noted that it is still, quote, possible for older adults with ASPD to continue to cause disturbance and create conflict in their lives. Such individuals may behave in irritable and even aggressive ways towards fellow residents and staff in nursing homes. Perhaps those living in the community might also commit these antisocial acts toward family members, neighbors, and friends. As the authors pointed out, it's also possible that the antisocial older adult whose disorder is undetected may be incorrectly diagnosed as having a cognitive disorder that affects their ability to inhibit aggressive behavior. Missing the ASPD diagnosis for these individuals can have important practical consequences. They can continue to present harm towards those around them without anyone realizing that their behavior represents a psychological disorder, or they may receive inappropriate medical treatment or institutionalization. Yeah, interesting. Underdiagnosis of ASPD in the elderly or in the older populations. Outwitting the older adult with ASPD. Next section. What if you're someone who's been scammed or is being scammed by an older adult who may have undiagnosed ASPD? Without recognizing it, you could easily hand over your cash or possessions to someone who seems to be on the up and up because of their age. They may have a great investment opportunity to offer you, or a need to help them pay for their medications, rent, or transportation. Indeed, as Holzer, etc., suggest, this individual may have learned to use various cagey methods more typically associated with narcissism, such as exploitation and manipulation. Because so many people do assume that older people lack criminal energetics, i.e. physical strength or agility, it's easy to miss the possibility that someone with gray hair is capable of engaging in other behaviors that can leave you blindsided. Consider 3 diagnostic criteria individuals with ASPD pathology endorsed to a lesser degree than their younger counterparts and use these as a guide. To sum up, from a clinical point of view, knowing that ASPD can contribute to exist in the people you think have grown out of it can benefit a mental health perspective. In your own life, you may not know a Mr. Z, but you protect yourself by becoming wise to his less intense counterparts. There you go. Good to know. Depressing to know. The older folks can still be out to scam you guys. So there you go, man. Interesting piece. What antisocial personality disorder looks like in late life. Fascinating. Pretty cool. Yeah. Wow. This is an interesting episode. We're learning a lot. All right. I think this is going to be this will probably be our last piece. We'll see. All right. This is from a website called SciPost. New research suggests adverse childhood experiences accelerate the biological processes of aging. Interesting. Individuals exposed to adverse childhood experiences tend to be biologically older than their counterparts, according to new research published in the scientific journal Psychoneuroendocrinology. Adverse childhood experiences refer to a set of potentially traumatic events that occur before adulthood. These experiences include various forms of abuse and neglect, witnessing intimate partner violence, parental death or serious illness, parental divorce or separation, and psychiatric illness of a family member. Biological aging, on the other hand, refers to the accumulation of damage and loss of function to cells, tissues, and organs. Previous research has found that people exposed to adverse childhood experiences are more likely to suffer from chronic diseases and have a shorter lifespan. That is so messed up, man. The authors of the new study were interested in whether accelerated biological aging could help explain the relationship between adverse childhood experiences and poor health outcomes later in life. This work was part of a team effort led by Dr. Dawn Bowdish at McMaster University to better understand the factors that influence the health trajectories of individuals over the life course, said corresponding author Chris Verscher, a scientist at the Health Sciences North Research Institute and assistant professor at McMaster University and the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. Quote, I am interested in the detriments of health and immunity on older adults, particularly how they intersect with a person's biology. This study provided a unique opportunity to quantify how different forms of early life adversity impact the biological age of a person 30 to 60 years later. The research analyzed data from the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging, a long-term study of adult development and aging, which includes 50,000 Canadians who were aged 45 to 85 years at the time of recruitment. The study focused on 23,354 participants who had completed a 90-minute interview and taken part in physical and clinical assessments. The researchers examined a number of biomarkers related to the biological aging process, including albumin, creatine, glycated hemoglobin, C-reactive protein, lymphocyte percentage, mean cell volume, red blood cell distribution width, and white blood cell count. Interesting. The average age of the participants was 59, and most, 63%, reported experiencing at least one adverse childhood experience. Participants who reported adverse childhood experiences tended to be biologically older than those who did not. In addition, the researchers found that the link between adverse childhood experiences and biological age was stronger for more severe forms of adversity, such as physical and sexual abuse. The findings suggest that, quote, that harms in early life can take many forms and can lead to health consequences many years down the road. Versshore told SciPost, quote, what our study shows is that these consequences manifest as perturbations to multiple biological systems, which can be measured from biomarkers in blood. But the researchers noted that nearly all of the observed effect sizes were relatively small. Adverse childhood experiences were also associated with education level and smoking status, which in turn were related to biological age. The study authors said future research utilizing longitudinal data could help us better understand the factors linking adverse childhood experiences to biological age. Quote, what our study doesn't show is whether the biological changes we detected were caused by the early life events themselves or from other events or risky behaviors that happened later in life as a consequence, Versshore explained. Quote, as mentioned, this was a team effort and could not have happened without the participants of the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging and the involvement of great collaborators, he added, especially Dr. Oksana Mian, the postdoctoral fellow that performed much of the work, Dr. Dan Belsky of Columbia University, and Dr. Andrea Gonzalez of McMaster University. The study, entitled Associations Between Exposure to Adverse Childhood Experiences and Biological Aging, Evidence from the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging, was authored by Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, so is it the actual traumas of childhood, or is it those traumas that lead to risky behavior? It's a good study. It's an interesting piece. Yeah, so today we read some interesting pieces. We read Why You're Never Going to Be Satisfied with Your Life. We read 4 Functions of Expressive Arts Therapy, which got me all hot and bothered for some reason. I wonder what that's like for you guys to listen to. Hopefully it's entertaining. Me all mildly agitated. I don't know. 7 habits that can lower your risk of dementia. What antisocial personality disorder looks like in late life. And new research suggests adverse childhood experiences accelerate the biological processes of aging. Wow. We learned a lot, you guys. Coming in close to an hour, so I'm going to wrap up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the podcast. Please share this and other episodes. You can find all of the episodes wherever you listen to podcasts, so check them out. We've got some great interviews. This is a solo episode, as you know. I hope you enjoy that. Join the newsletter at jfodnews.com. You can find out about upcoming podcasts and other information. Also, get on that patreon.com/jfod. All sorts of great added bonus content for you. I'm John F. O'Donnell. This has been another episode of Take Your Pills, Psychopath, the comedy podcast that exploits mental illness for personal profit. What? Trademark. You guys rock. I appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Love you guys. Bye.